Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Born Podcast, brought to you from our studio here in central Pennsylvania. I'm your host, Nathan Imboden, and I have the privilege of being able to interview great business owners and leaders right here in our backyard in central Pennsylvania, really revealing the message of true entrepreneurship and business ownership, what it really takes to start, grow, and run successful organizations. You can find full replays of our broadcast on our website at questmont.com/bornpodcast. Also, any social media outlet you like, any podcast app you like, search for The Born Podcast and hit that like or follow button so you can stay up to date on all our episodes. Today I'm really excited because we have Don Schin, who has a dual role, and I think I pronounced that correctly.
You did.
He has a dual role. So he is the CEO of Franchise Building Expert. And he is also the Chief Growth Officer at, let me get this right, Business Alliance Incorporated. But the main thing we're going to talk about is your business, the Franchise Building Expert, correct?
Yeah, sounds good.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Why don't you give us just a little background on Don? Who is Don?
Yeah.
Who is Don?
Yeah. Spent about 23 years in the corporate world. I joke about being a corporate refugee. If anybody knows the AMP Incorporated, I was not an amputee. That was actually a headline in the Patriot News.
I forgot that, yeah.
But I was not an amputee, but after the acquisition, after a few months of the acquisition, just decided this was not for me anymore. This was not the career that I had been developing. And so decided, okay, what do I do when I grow up? And looked at a number of changing jobs, and they were both really good career advancement opportunities, but both incorporated another move.
Okay.
And it was back in the day when you moved, you didn't live and, work for a company somewhere else. And so we had moved 7 times in 19 years.
Wow.
For AMP, and it's all great. So we loved all that, but we were at a point where we're done with this moving stuff, even though it meant significant improvement in my career. So long story short, I started to investigate what could I do, and of course, there's no way to go parallel really in this area, or there wasn't at the time with AMP. So I wasn't going to change industries and make chocolate, and I wasn't going to go work for the government. And so after those two, what else do you do?
Yeah.
So it led me to look at something that I'd always thought about doing, but never had the catalyst. And so I took that as my catalyst to move out and look at business ownership myself, and looked at a couple of things. And for example, and no offense against kids or anything, but I was looking at like a family fun center, and laser tag was big. And then a friend of mine said, well, what hours are you going to be working? And I'm there, well, probably 7 days a week, 12 or 14 hours a day. And he said, are you used to doing that? Well, no, I had a professional, shirt and tie job. And then I also looked at who were the clientele. And again, it was not that I love kids, but, purple hair, pierced, tattooed kids at the time was not my target market. And so I just started to look, and I worked a little bit with a career coach to determine, well, who was I, and what was I all about, and what kinds of things that I love doing, and I realized I loved people. I wanted to be in a people mentoring, give back kind of a business, and I wanted to grow something. It had to be something that I could build. And so I looked to franchising, and franchising turned out to be the right course for me. I helped bring an Australian company that was in its infancy. They had about 50 or 60 franchises globally, but nothing here in the U.S. Yeah. And so I brought it to the U.S. I brought it to Pennsylvania. I brought it to central Pennsylvania, and just built from there. So that kind of leads us to today. The career has changed me a great deal over the years. It's given me a great deal of flexibility. I much more live out my faith in my business today that I never did. You really couldn't in the corporate structure.
Yep.
And so a lot of things have changed, but it was the right decision for me.
What were you doing in the corporate world?
I started in technical sales. They have AMP was a technical company, so I started as a sales engineer, moved my way up into what they used to call industry management. And then I was fortunate. I got a really cool assignment. It was like an exchange program with our subsidiary in Japan. So two people went to Japan. I was only one of two people working in a subsidiary of 1,000 Japanese people. Came back and ran a lot of the Japanese business that was coming to the U.S. Went back again in a different assignment, different industry, but so it moved up from a technical sale really into industry, what they called industry marketing or industry management. And when I left, I was a director of a global business sector, not a division, but a sector, a section in the division. And it was about a $300 million responsibility for that company. It wasn't a lot of money, but for me, it was a lot of money.
Yeah, interesting. So there's sales there, because one of the questions I like to try to figure out with people is, where does that itch, that entrepreneurial bug kind of stem from? So did you have any bouts with, if you will, or stints of entrepreneurship prior to getting in the corporate world that kind of you brought back? Or
Well, that's a really great question, because one of the small segments of my AMP career was I ran a small department. It was about $20 million department, but I had an engineer, I had a product manager, I had a materials manager, and I was responsible for material. I was responsible for P&L. It was like this small company inside this big conglomerate.
Okay.
And that, I think, honestly, that really gave me the taste for small business. That really let me say, wow, I can do this. Yeah, I had the big safety net, but I had to make decisions, and I reported to a VP, and he wasn't that involved in it, and so it was great. I mean, we were doing our own thing, doing a lot of really different things.
Yeah.
So that I think honestly was my first real taste of running a small business.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
So it jumps then to where you're at now, and I know there's a little bit of a history with some franchises that you ran, bought, sold, now to what you're doing today. So maybe let's just jump to where you're at today and the business you run. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. When I exited in 2015 from a global franchise, the one I helped bring to the States. I sold. They were making some change, or talking about making some changes. And I said, well, that doesn't fit with me. I'm your first guy here in the U.S. It's not what I bought into. But I also said, if you want to do that, you really want my territory, because Philadelphia, you run into a number of different states, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland. So I'm there. You want Philadelphia, as a city for what you want to do. So long story short, they bought me out.
Okay.
And then after that, again, it was sort of an awakening. What do I want to do again when I grow up?
Yeah. And
I wanted to stay in that people business, but I wanted instead of helping people into a single franchise, which is what I was doing, as it was called a master franchisee or an area developer, what I was now wanted to do and became was what's called a broker or a consultant for all kinds of franchises.
Okay.
And it's kind of the easiest way for me to explain it to people is we're like the Match.com or the eHarmony for people who want to start a franchise, want to buy a franchise. So that got me started down a different path, but still in my space, in my franchise space. So since then, Franchise Building Expert which is our company, has become a number of other things. People come to us now and say, I want to franchise my business. How do I do that?
Sure.
People come to us and say, we've already franchised it, but now we don't know what to do.
Sure.
Or we've tried to do this for a year or two. How do we grow it? How do we get this thing really going and start it? And so we'll do that. We'll help people. It's called, like you've heard of, a fractional CEO where we do fractional franchise development.
Okay.
And then every once in a while we get something wild and crazy. Like we're working right now with a bubble tea company who the gentleman just wants to simplify his life. He has all of the U.S. to develop for a Taiwanese company.
Okay.
And he's there, can you sell these territories for me? And we're having a good deal of success with that. So we'll do odds and ends, but mostly we're doing the eHarmony stuff.
Yeah.
And we're doing the fractional sales stuff.
Interesting.
And that's led us into what happens with this franchise broker space is that there are organizations, there are large organizations of brokers and franchisors, these organizations kind of marry the two.
Yeah.
So I have now access to 355 different franchisors, different franchise concepts that our eHarmony, so to speak, company can place people in.
Okay.
So it's pretty cool when you think about it, because we not only help change the lives of the individual person that's changing careers, but we impact their families, and even deeper than that, when we help them start a franchise or two in their community, they're hiring people, they're creating jobs, and so we have a downline, so to speak, or a ripple effect on communities when we help somebody open up a franchise.
Yeah. We talk about it's that multiplier effect with any employer, where you don't just have a 1x impact on your employee. Right. It's a 2.5 or 3.
Absolutely.
Because they have family members, or it's even larger than that because of their community around them.
Absolutely.
Or whatever. And by doing what you're doing, you're not just impacting a smaller group of employees that you work with, but you're able to kind of branch that out.
Absolutely.
To a much wider.
Absolutely. And I love and I'm going to paraphrase it, but a couple of years ago at the International Franchise Association National Show, the CEO of McDonald's was the leadoff speaker. And he said that franchising is like the on-ramp to entrepreneurism and building generational wealth.
Yeah.
And when I think that, if I embrace that, and my team embraces that, then we have a real responsibility with everyone that we work with and in their communities.
Yeah.
So,
how do people then engage with you on, let's say Nathan comes to Don and says, I think I'm really interested in a franchise and getting into that side of the world. What does that process look like to help me figure out whether I supposedly have a laser focus on this is the industry I want to get into, or I just know I want to do something like that? Maybe I'm like you, where you think, oh, maybe franchising is the route, but I don't know where to go when you first started. What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. We have a process that we take people through. It involves some assessment tools, some like personality, behavioral assessment type tools. We have an interviewing process. We have an application, so to speak, or a questionnaire that we take people through, and we interview them a couple of different times. It's a number of weeks for us to really get to know them, understand what they've done in the past, as well as what we're really looking for are transferable skills. Because most people don't, if they want to open a restaurant, they've never had restaurant experience. And so we're
celebrities do it all the time.
Well, that's
it's
true.
Gotta be.
That's right. So we're looking for transferable skills. We're also looking for things that they would have a passion for, kind of their why. And so we pull all of this together, and then we create a set of what we call key factors, non-negotiables, must-haves for them in a business. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes people come in and go, well, I really think I want to do ABC. And I tell them, that's great. Maybe that's right for you.
Yeah.
And if that is what you really want, I can show you those kinds of businesses.
Yeah.
But what we often do is say, work with us, be open, be a little bit open-minded, because when we find out your why and we find out your transferable skills and the keys that you're looking for, it could be something you've never thought of before.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty cool for people to go, wow, I never thought of a business like that.
Yeah.
Junk hauling? Are you kidding me? Or mosquito spraying? Or but that's what fits.
Yeah.
If indeed that's what fits.
Interesting.
So that's what we do, and
Okay.
it's fun and it's exciting, and people really, franchising is especially if you've never owned a business before. Franchising is a great way to get into entrepreneurism and business ownership, but there's all kinds of government statistics about how successful franchises are. But take that at one level deeper and say, well, get me into the right franchise, the one that really matches me. How much better is it going to be, both your personal fulfillment as well as just your overall success? And that's in essence what our process does.
Do you actually then assist in the process of you do the finding of the franchise do you also work with them to actually buy in or whatever that process is? And then I know you mentioned on the back end some like getting rid of or exiting the franchise world. So what does that?
Yeah, we work with them all the way up to the point where they decide on something and they go forward.
Okay.
So we help them with funding because a lot of people have no idea how to fund it. You know, there's simple things like not simple, but more obvious like an SBA loan.
Sure.
But there's also 401k rollovers. There's
Right.
just a lot of programs out there to help people fund businesses. We help them with referrals to an attorney. You know, you don't want them to go to their wills and
Right.
estate planning attorneys, no offense to them, but you want them to go to a specialist in franchising, you know, that understands franchising. So we can make referrals to franchise attorneys. And so things like that, we can help them along the way to be sure they're doing it the right way and that they have qualified or quality referrals, quality advisors above and beyond us. So yeah, we'll stay with them there that way. We don't do much beyond that with them individually. What we have been doing is actually training. We've been working with franchisors. It's been kind of interesting. We've been approached by a couple of growing franchisors and their realization that they hired or they sold franchises to people passionate about their brand, but little to no business experience. So like now, you know, the hydration IV drips are a big trending franchise. So it attracts a lot of nurses because you have to be a registered nurse to put a needle in somebody's arm. But a registered nurse probably has no fundamental business understandings. So we're actually now we've created some programs that we are working with the franchisees, but it's through the mothership.
Okay,
You know, it's
got
through
it.
the franchisors.
Yeah.
So
Oh, cool. Then on the back end, somebody wants to exit their franchise. They've built it up and they want to exit it.
Yep.
Do you step in there? And if so, what does that look like?
we don't do much in that space.
Okay.
We have done some things in these broker organizations, what we call resales. There are times where there are resales come up. It's a smaller percentage of what we do. We can kind of locally work as a local business broker and help them exit or help them sell their franchise. But that end isn't much of what it's
Okay.
not in our general space.
Okay.
We can do it, we have done it, but typically we don't.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the bulk of what you're doing is on the front end,
Front end.
On the discovery, deep understanding, and then right placement and getting them kind of off the ground, that kind of launch point, and then letting them run with it there.
Correct.
Yeah.
We are in our process. We are starting to talk more about the exit because Stephen Covey, I think, talked about begin with the end in mind. There's a lot of other folks that have advised on how you ever before you even get in, decide how you're going to get out.
Yeah.
And so we are entertaining that conversation more and more, so they understand I'm not going to be able to do this forever, and we want them to do it well when they do exit. So we're having those conversations, but we don't actively participate in that end game. It's I mean, you know this better than I do, but it's very important. What I've seen in not so much franchising, what I've seen in small business is an owner, their identity is associated with their business.
Yeah.
And so the thought of not coming to the business every day is foreign.
Yeah.
But they get to a place, and I'm sure you see this, they get to a place where they go, I'm kind of getting tired, I'm not enjoying this as much as I want to. So they step back a little bit. And what happens to the business? The part-time results or part-time effort gets part-time results is what I've always said. So their business starts to slow down. And then one day they wake up and they go, oh my gosh, my business is down. I better get out now.
Yeah.
Well, anybody in business brokerage or selling of businesses knows that is not an attractive business to sell.
Yeah.
And so we like to talk to people getting into business about that. Don't let that happen to you. because and obviously people like yourself, you have to talk them through their change in identity and when they exit. But so it's a conversation we're starting to have, but we're not that involved at the end.
Yeah, I've found most times the conversation isn't as difficult around financials, although most business owners definitely believe their business is worth way more than it actually is.
Yeah.
But the harder conversations tend to be around what's next.
Yeah.
What does life look like next? What is my purpose after this?
Yep.
And those are extremely important conversations to have, because without that guidance, you're left with who knows what. Who knows what.
Yeah.
And
I think that they think it's worth more is that they're thinking, and again, and what I've seen is they're thinking of what it looked like 2 years ago or 3 years ago when they started to sort of just step away from it. And so it isn't worth what they thought it was 2 or 3 years down the road. Yeah.
I'm part of an exit planning association that they love using in some of their education. They use the idea that business owners need to look at their business as an investment and not a job.
Yeah.
Because when you look at it as a job, you're just kind of punching a clock, but you're not necessarily thinking about 3 years from now, 5 years from now, an exit strategy, and being willing. If you look at it as an investment, you have to then remove essentially emotional attachment as much as you can from it.
Yeah.
Difficult to do when it's your sweat and tears and sweat equity that's going into building something up. But
I think a lot of business owners, they build their business around themselves.
Yeah.
And they don't recognize that that's the worst thing they could do, because if they ever want to exit it or retire, all of 80% of the business goes with them.
Yeah.
And franchising's a lot of that, to be honest with you. A lot of franchise are people, they're just called owner-operator franchises, and they want to make about the same amount of money, but they want to get out of the whatever, a boss or whatever, and they want to be on their own. They want their control and lifestyle, but there's no real exit for them. Again, when they are ready to be done, they'll maybe sell the book of business, to somebody else, but that kind of model is not long term. They're not really building an asset.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, you're in this space, so you should be able to, I would guess, speak pretty passionately about the general question: why franchising versus something else?
Yeah.
Or say I've got skills as a plumber. Why shouldn't I just go out and start a plumbing business versus looking into a franchise?
Yeah. Again, that's a great question. What?
By the way, I don't have skills as a plumber. So that's not,
I was gonna get my calendar out.
That's some leaky.
We
stuff
are having,
yeah.
That's funny. I think a lot of it is people don't realize what there is to a business when they've been employed.
Yeah.
And I use a story or an analogy, and it's probably a stupid one, but if you needed if you had a job and you needed transportation to get to that job, but you had to build that transportation to get there, what would that look like? And because you need to make money, and while you're building the car, you can't just stop and take a year and build the car.
Right.
And I look at it the same way with people that start businesses. They need to make money pretty much right away.
Yeah.
So they're out there trying stuff, but they don't realize that the whole car is not built yet.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think it's all about. They don't recognize how when you're employed, you don't recognize the structure that's there. You don't recognize the processes that are there. You don't recognize the momentum that an existing business already has.
Right.
And so that's a lot of what I think franchising gives someone. And that's why I say, look, if you've owned a business before, you can probably start another business and not be as much of a problem. But if it's your first venture at stepping out on your own, go the franchise route, at least to get started, because all of that structure is there.
Sure.
All of the training is there. All of the support is there.
Yeah.
And you have to start it up. But believe me, there's already, because there's a brand there, there's already momentum in the marketplace for that particular business. You just have to be opening one
Yeah.
in your town. So that's the biggest reason I tell people why a franchise versus doing something on your own. The other thing is that I think the ROI is a lot faster turnaround on the ROI. Personal experience has been maybe 2 to 3 years to really ROI. You'll cash flow faster in a franchise. Whereas most of my friends who've started their own businesses, if they're honest with me, they'll say 6 years, 7 years, maybe 8 years before they really felt it was set up and structured and on its own and doing well. So those are generalizations, but I just think it's a different cash flow, but fundamentally you'll probably spend more money doing it yourself over those 6 or 8 years. Whereas, you put a lot of money up front with a franchise, but your ROI is probably half.
Yeah, interesting. What are the major cons around franchising? And I know you could probably do a Google search and find different things that say, avoid franchises because of X or Y or Z. And I'm a believer in most of that. Those opinions are bunk. Reality is, and I use this as an example. People ask me questions about a certain topic, and I'll say, well, asking me that question is kind of like asking, should I buy a car? And I don't know. Should you? Are you a family of? You mentioned a family member that has a number of kids. So let's say your daughter, correct?
Yeah, sure.
That was looking for a family vehicle, and she decides to buy a smart car for her family vehicle.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the smart car is a bad car?
Yeah.
No, it means that the application of that purchase and the use of that was a bad use.
Yeah.
But oftentimes what happens is that the smart car then gets attacked as the bad vehicle. And, don't buy a smart car.
Yeah.
We don't have all the facts.
Yeah.
And there's not context as to why you wouldn't want to do that. And I think the same thing probably applies with franchises. But
I think there's some fundamentals, though. One is if you're very a maverick, if you're very much out of the box and you like to have your imprint, your fingerprint on whatever you're doing, then you're probably not going to fit in a franchise because they want you to follow the system because that system works. If you're not disciplined, you still need some of the fundamental disciplines that you need in business in general. And if you don't have that drive to get up you still have to, people go, franchising, it's easy. And chambers of commerce even used to say, not allow franchise owners to apply for awards and stuff because they say, that's not fair because they're a franchise. You still got to get up, put your pants on the same way the independent business owner does. But if you're not disciplined to do those kinds of things, a franchise isn't going to work for you.
Yeah. By the way, we all have I'm in Vistage. I have other peer-to-peer groups. Should that preclude me from? In a way, it's a similar type of guidance. You're asking other people who have stepped into something that you haven't done before for advice and guidance. Yeah. So it's just called smart.
I agree. I
Sorry,
agree.
I think that's a bogus argument. So,
it's years ago. I don't think they're doing it anymore, but
I don't think so
20 plus years ago, that was a thing. And I would say if you just don't want to, again, it depends on the size of the franchise company and so on. I have a friend of mine that went with a brand that was kind of an emerging brand. It blew up. It was a great franchise. They were acquired, by an investment capital company. So now they're part of a company that owns 30 some different brands. And for the original people in there, they're not liking it.
Yeah.
So if you kind of feel that there'll just be too much big brother, too much oversight, too much reporting, then franchising probably isn't right. But I was at a franchise meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the person said, and it's so obvious, but yet it just hits you oh wow. He said, the model is the same. They were presenting 9 brands to us, and they said the model is the same. It's the person driving it. It's the person running it.
Yeah.
And so you can have a superstar, or you can have somebody even fail, but he's there. The model is the same. And and so that's what I like about franchising. I mean, I think it really gives people the opportunity, but it's you still got to get up every day,
Right.
and go do. You got to hire people, and when Susie or John don't show up, you may
Right.
have to step in and do it, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, you're still running the business. You just have a toolbox and a kit
yep.
that somebody else has figured out some of these kinks before you that you don't have to figure out yourself, but there's still going to be
Yep.
issues you have to figure out. It's not like
Day
you're
to
still
day.
making decisions, right? You're still running it day
Correct.
to day. And at the end of the day, that's what we have to all learn is business. And that even the most seasoned business owners, 25 years running a business, they're still going to be faced with things day
Yes.
to day that they haven't dealt with before, or a new situation that they're going to have to learn from. So it's all,
Yep.
to
Yep.
me, it's all the same.
Yeah, we in franchising we often say you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
that's the phrase we use a lot, and I think that's true. I think that's true.
Are there typical startup costs that somebody has to look at or be aware of when they're going into a franchise?
Yeah, the great thing about I'm not a big fan of government looking into things or involved in things, but this is one that's very good for the consumer. There's a document called a disclosure document, similar to in the stock market. You have prospectus. Well, this is a prospectus for franchises. It's called a franchise disclosure document, and in there, every possible costs that you might incur as a franchise operator or owner has to be stated in there. So yes, some of the fundamental startup ones for everybody going to be a one-time franchise fee, and that can range from 25,000 to maybe 60,000.
Okay.
There are regular ongoing fees called royalties. That'll range from 4 to 8% of your gross sales.
But that'll come just off the top of your sales.
Correct.
So you're not necessarily writing a check for that.
No,
Okay.
typically correct. That's
Yep.
correct.
Okay.
There's ad fund or a marketing national, like a co-op fund, and that could be 2 to 5%. So those are some of the fundamentals.
Okay.
But most franchises, all in, including working capital to get you running for 3 or 4 months, 70% of the franchises we have available are somewhere between 75,000 and 150,000.
Okay.
So the bulk of them are going to be in that range.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about anything that you need to build out, those are typically going to start at 200, 250,000
Sure.
and go up.
Okay.
Depending on the brand. And there's very little that's under 50,000.
Yeah.
Once in a while people will come to us, and we have maybe 10% of our portfolio could be, startup is 50,000 or less.
Okay.
But it's very limited. You really have to be around 100,000. You have to be interested in investing at around 100,000, and that will cover all of your startups. But there could be technology fees. There's a lot of other fees that can come in, but the three I mentioned are the ones. They're there all the time, every franchise.
Okay. And it sounds like one of the nice parts of some of those costs they are only incurred with sales.
Correct.
And so, in theory, you don't sell anything, you don't have those
Correct.
royalty costs because you're not selling anything.
Exactly
Now,
right.
That's not a good thing because you're not generating
That's right.
any revenue, so you got to pay yourself somehow.
Yeah, you want to pay royalties.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Very true.
All
Yeah.
right.
And some are just one-time fees too.
Sure.
You pay it once, and you have a 10-year contract, and there might be a
Okay.
renewal fee, but it's nothing compared to the 30, 40, 50,000 you paid up front. So
Yeah. All right. Well, time flies when you're having fun, Don. I want to come to one question before we kind of pivot and close things out. And it's something you said a little bit earlier about getting into this world has allowed you to live out your faith a little bit more than you could in the corporate side. And I think one thing in our intake question that you had mentioned was living your entire week the same way, not just on Sunday. So what does that mean to you in terms of how you incorporate that into Monday through Saturday or in your business?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I don't see a difference anymore.
Okay.
I am who I am, and I live the way I'm living, and I try to act the way I act, regardless of what day it is. I don't go to church for just to be uplifted for an hour, hour and a half, and then I go back to normal. That just I've been able to make those adjustments and that transition. So what I mean by that is it's and a lot of people think they should be absolutely two different things, and I just don't.
Yeah.
So it's in the way I do my business. For example, I had and I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I remember having a bookkeeper one time say to me, I've never done the books for anybody that runs their business like in a positive way, that runs their business like you do. One of the businesses that I had over the last few years was we actually I would let one of the big churches here in town has a big open house Christmas for people that can't afford gifts, and you could come in and literally take things to, in essence, buy for your kids. So we let employees just go to that they were getting paid. They didn't no personal time or whatever. We're never hesitant to pray if there's something that needs prayer. I mean, we even one of that same company. We even one time somebody we interviewed somehow found out that she didn't even. It was winter. It was coming winter. She didn't even have a winter coat. So we had her go with someone to go out on our nickel, the company's nickel, and buy her a coat. So I don't see the separation of the two, and that's just the way I do it. It's just the way I do it, and I can't separate it anymore. I definitely would tell you there was a time in my life I did, but I don't separate it anymore. So people know who I am. I'm not perfect.
None of us
by
are.
any chance,
by
any shape of the imagination, but people know what they're getting. They don't all have to believe what I believe, but they know, they have a good sense of knowing how I'm going to treat them and the environment we're going to create for them and that kind of thing. So
cool. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for asking.
Being the hands and feet 7 days a week, right?
Trying.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up, why don't and clearly, if you're interested, anybody that's watching is interested in the franchise business, Don and his team, they're definitely people you should be talking to. So if anybody's been listening and they're saying, hey, I've got some questions around it, maybe I'm new or thinking about it, or I'm seasoned and have other issues that I'm dealing with, what is the best way for people to learn more about you, your organization, and to contact you?
Yeah, no, great question. Either through LinkedIn, if somebody is on LinkedIn. I'm very prominent on LinkedIn. Also, our website, which is informative. It's an informative website, but it's franchisebuildingexpert.com. Is a great way to reach out. There's a contact form there. And I have a podcast, Franchise Pitfalls and Profits, which if you want to learn about franchising, you want to learn about new brands that are coming out, you want to learn how to buy a franchise. I have, I think, probably 18 or 20 months worth of podcasts. So they can go on to our podcasts and start to learn more about franchising.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have that information in our notes and stuff that we put out there. So
that'd be awesome.
This has been fantastic, Don.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Clearly, again, an expert in the franchise world. And if you have any questions, certainly reach out to Don, his team, check out their website. And ultimately, I'd say follow the guidance and just helping the world become a better place. And thank you for leading by that and for helping make our community a better place. So everyone at home, we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Born Podcast.